You've said Ireland has an unusual relationship with nature, and our disconnection from the land mirrors our disconnection from the language. What does that mean?
It means we're complex people with a complex history. And I think our relationship with the language is a difficult one. Mirrors our history. We're both colonized people and colonizers. And our relationship with the English language as well as the Irish language is what makes us who we are today, but is also reflected in the landscape. How the landscape has been changed over time, deforested, exploited by people, different types of people, different cultures that have come to this island. And really that relationship with Irish, that was the language here for thousands of years, that had a deep-seated, I suppose, connection with nature, and the language developed with the nature on the island. And then English has been superimposed on the island with its people in more recent times. And I'm talking 300 or 400 years is quite recent when you deal with nature, because there's no new habitats or species. I mean, these things, everything has been here a very long time. And humans are, our influence on that is quite recent. So it's difficult to kind of articulate, but it's interesting how the Irish language often shows you a reflection of what was there in the past. And a lot of these kind of nuggets of information is held in the language from the past. So something very simple is the name of the national park where I work is Glenveagh, Glen of the Birches. Now, if I brought a bunch of tourists and they get off the bus and they're in the middle of the valley and they look around and the name of the park was Valley of the Birches National Park, the first question they'd ask is, where's all the birch trees? But they're standing in the national park and it's called Glenveagh or Glenveagh. They don't have a clue. Nobody is thinking about that, because there's a disconnect from what the meaning of the language is and what we hear and what we see today. I suppose that's just a very simple reflection of our disconnect from the language, and then also a disconnect from the history of the landscape.
I suppose humans, there's not a part of Ireland that isn't influenced by humans.
Yeah, our terrestrial land, our landscape is human-made. And often people think the countryside that we have is, like wild in some way, or that even the woodlands that we have are wild, but they're not. They're just the influence of humans on all of the habitats and species we have in Ireland has just been so much that what we have is changed or degraded. It's not all completely degraded, but it's certainly been changed and influenced by man. And where we live here in Donegal, we have the Highlands of Donegal, or the central area with the mountains, and people go there, and that's the national park where I work now, and they think that's natural. And it's difficult to explain to them, actually, this is a degraded landscape. All the trees have been cut down, it's been drained, it's been exploited, minerals have been taken out, and people, our vision or impression of what's natural or what is nature has been changed over time, over the generations. And it's hard to convince people that what they're looking at should be changed because they're so used to it and they're comfortable with it. And they're saying, well, it's like that in my grandparents' time. And you're going, yeah, but that doesn't make it right. It's been like that a long time, but it doesn't make it right. And what we're trying to do there now is to introduce trees back into the landscape.
What kind?
Native trees, so birch trees, oak trees mainly.
Because there's so little of them trees in Ireland. Like all them forests are gone. Like there's very, very little. That's the only one I know of.
Very few patches of what we would call ancient woodland. So it's been woodland continuously since the last ice age. Like it's never been completely cleared, so there was no trees there. Very few of them, but even those patches have been influenced by humans. People go in, cut trees, cut limbs for boat building, make charcoal, graze it, regularly throughout the year. So it's, they're man influenced or semi-natural environments. So I think we need to be honest with ourselves if we're trying to work with nature or have a relationship with nature, we need to be honest about what's happened and what we've done in the past, and not kid ourselves that what we have now is something to protect or conserve in the state that it's in. So I suppose that's maybe where I start to differ from some of my colleagues, where they think that what we have now is worthwhile conserving in the current state. Other people, you get to this kind of stage really where you ask the question, do you want to preserve the landscape like a historic landscape? It's like our grandparents. This is the landscape our grandparents made. And do we want it to look like that forever? Like a kind of museum piece. And in some areas of Britain, like the Lake District, they've decided that's what they want to do. And that's fine. And that was kind of like their peak, Victorian era, where they really, I suppose they see that as maybe the peak of kind of British society at that time. But in Ireland, we have that kind of different relationship with that time. Or do we want to conserve the landscape like we have it now, the way it's made up, different habitats, wet heat, dry heat, woodland? Or do we want to restore the landscape? But if we're going to restore it, what are we going to restore to, or when? So what I often say to people, what do you want to restore? Do you want to restore woodland to pre-famine? Because there was a famine in Ireland, a number of famines, but a really big one, when, if someone's dying and a tree or a stick is of value, you're going to use it. Of course, and hedgerows and what have you. We lost a lot of habitats during that period of time.
Why that specific period of time?
Because people were extremely poor,
right,
and people needed resources. So there was a very heavy burden on the land at that time. So even when you read about evictions, say from properties during that period, the 1800s, they would take the roof beams with them. So a piece of wood was worth a lot at the time. So that's how valuable sticks or, a trunk of a tree was to rebuild or to make a shelter with it. So they've been evicted from the building. The roof was tossed in, usually in the doors, but they would take the timbers with them because they were valuable. So oftentimes they were using pine taken out of the bog and what have you. So timber was scarce, very scarce. So the woodland levels we have now are some of, if not the lowest, comparable with our European countries. They had different kind of histories and different experiences, but we were kind of right on the brink then in that mid 1800s, and all of the wildlife and countryside was kind of stripped bare, basically because people were starving. So they were going to try and eat or use as much as whatever resources they had to hand. So do you want to go back to woodland before then?
Wow, I never knew that.
Yeah.
But I mean, you think about it, they had nothing else. They just
Nothing.
Shelter was their resource.
I mean, you catch a bird, you can eat it.
Yeah.
You catch a mammal, you can eat it. If you're hard times and you read about people eating grass, you'd eat a mammal before you'd eat grass, or you'd eat a bird. So wildlife at that time, certainly there was mapping surveys done in the early 1800s, and to accompany that, they did a survey and a kind of discussion about the resources in areas, and the Ordnance Survey. And it was really interesting because they described what resources were in kind of townlands and locations, particularly in Donegal where they started. And, they talk about not a tree or a bush within sight, for 10 miles, because the landscape was just stripped bare. And that's before the Great Famine.
So how do you let that happen? Is that happening?
Well, we're trying. Yeah. So what we're doing is we're reducing, I suppose, what we see as the pressures or threats. So in the Glenveagh example, the deer herd there has got absolutely out of control, and completely overgrazed the area for probably 70 or 80 years.
What if you introduce wolves?
Yeah, that's the obvious thing that people say. Until a wolf prefers to run after a deer that's very fast than it does eating a sheep, which stands there and goes, yeah. It's not really a runner.
No, I know. I just was throwing it there, like, but it's what would
that would be a more natural solution. But we're not there. We're not there. So what we're doing is we shoot the deer, or cull them, as the term is, and we reduce the numbers to allow the vegetation to grow and the trees and woodland then to restore itself over time. And as the trees grow up, the deer filter back into that area, because you're not trying to eradicate them out of the landscape. You need deer to kind of browse and to create that kind of mosaic in the landscape. And nature's messy. It's not perfect. It's not in neat little squares. Like a lot of the scientific approach to managing nature is, it's perfection. It's academic. But in reality, you've got wet pools, which is bog. You've got little patches of woodland. You've got dry bits of ground. You've got wet pieces of ground. And you can't put neat little fences around everywhere. Everything. So that's that type of habitat. That's this type of habitat. When you're managing at a landscape scale, 16, 17,000 hectares, that's big for Ireland.
That's just the size of Glenveagh,
That's the size of the park.
Does that include the Errigal, no?
There's part of Errigal is in, yeah.
Just the Glenveagh side of it?
Yes, yeah. And then there's other parts are in commonage. So it's difficult to bring people with you, because a national park is held in trust for the people. So the people have to believe in the idea and it's worthwhile. Or the minister could say, I'm going to rent it out for grazing. So people need to really believe in that idea. So you have to bring them with you, and you have to convince them that what you're doing is the right thing. So cutting that, like recently we cut down a lot of trees in the national park, and they're, but you cut down the trees and you're telling us you're trying to restore the woodland. And we're like, yeah, but those trees were planted 40 years ago. They're non-native pine trees from other countries. So it's complicated.
Pine trees, I'm not going to say I hate them, but I mean, they lack something. Maybe it's just a knowing within that these aren't supposed to be here.
Yeah. I suppose we need to be careful about being elitist as well. But if we're trying to get to a place where it's nature can kind of manage itself to a degree, we are part of nature, so we're always going to be part of the equation. The non-native trees, certainly some of them seem to really outcompete what we regard as native, like oak and birch. So we need to keep them suppressed or take them out of the equation to allow the native plants to flourish. So it's trying to strike a balance. It's kind of, without being a gardener.
Like you walk in, there's these big straight lines.
Yeah,
do you know what I mean?
Straight line. Well, that's
just not I don't mind getting into the woods, but when you walk in, then you're just looking at big rows. You know what I mean?
There's no light, but that's how they're planted. How we manage as well.
The ground's very
There's no
diversity,
no
biodiversity,
no vegetation.
It's just they're very
Well, that's a symptom. That's a symptom of the way we plant them as well. So we're in their native woodland in Oregon, in America, Sitka spruce, for instance. There's plenty of natural light, and there's lots of biodiversity, but they're managed in a different way. So the way we plant them here, and then clear fell them.
What's the purpose of it?
It's for timber, for logging.
Strictly for timber, yeah. Because they grow really fast.
Yes, and they grow fast in Ireland because we've got such great growing conditions. So we're basically temperate rainforest here. But on the other hand, is what I often say to people, we can grow an oak tree here in 60 to 80 years. That takes 120 to 140 in France.
Oh.
So we can grow Sitka spruce in twice the speed North America, but we can also do hardwoods in twice the speed. So it's just having a longer strategic vision for what we want to do in the countryside means not always trying to get the fastest kind of payback. And that was, the state when they established the kind of forestry schools, and that they took that German model of planting and clear felling And that was all the rage in the early and mid 1900s. But now we know better. It's more continuous forestry cover, taking out selective trees, and it's much better for nature and wildlife.